I was sitting in my kids' elementary school class, and it was a parent-teacher kid night thing, and the teacher passes out this sheet in the class, and it's about expectations, and I don't know how many of these we've gotten in our lifetime, and she begins to read the entire sheet to us word for word, and I'm sitting in the back, and I've already got ADD anyway, and I'm really irritated because I can read, and I'm like, well, don't insult my intelligence and read this whole sheet to me. Well, she reads the entire sheet. We get done with the meeting, and as we're walking out, the principal grabs me and says, hey, really glad you're here tonight. Was it helpful? Was it a good night? And I remember just before I could even think, the words came out of my mouth. Yeah, it was great. I really enjoyed having that sheet read to me word for word. And I was kind of laughing it off, and the principal got this dead serious look on her face. And she says, some of our parents can't read. And it hit me that I was no longer living in Kansas, as it were, that this was a new world, and that there was some huge needs right here in the school that my kids were part of that the church was either blind to or at worst ignoring. So this all started a journey personally for me with the question of what would it look like for the church to see their community as their mission field. Not in like a bumper sticker kind of way, but in a true missional fashion, if you will, where we actually ask the question, what does our culture need? What does our community need? And then we just exist to meet that need in the name of Jesus. About 5 years ago, we started to ask the question of what would it look like if our church no longer existed in our community? And we didn't really like the answer. We think our community would miss us, but in terms of impact, we weren't really sure if we would have had any impact. So I scheduled a meeting with our local school principal, and I asked her, tell me about the needs that you have in your school. Well, she told me about 3 huge needs that the school had. They have kids coming to school that can't afford school supplies. They've got kids that need help reading, and there's no one at home to help them read. And about 67% of those kids at that particular school were on the free breakfast, free lunch program. And she knew that those 67% kids went home to no food over the weekend. Now, these same kids were missing a lot of school because they weren't as healthy. They weren't as attentive because they were always hungry. So they were just watching these kids fall through the cracks. And it was hard for me to imagine that could happen in my city. So I went back to my church and I said, I have no idea what we are going to do, but we have to do something. Well, we partnered with an organization called Harvesters International, and they provide pallets of food for us. And then we have another guy in our church, he works for a printing company, and he had all these backpacks that he could provide. And so we started putting these food in this backpacks, and we went to the school counselor and said, we don't want to know who the kids are, but we want to provide food for as many of these kids as we can. Well, at the time, we could only pack 25 backpacks. So every Wednesday night, we had a crew that would pack backpacks, that would pray over those backpacks. Friday morning, they would deliver those backpacks to the school. The counselor would take those backpacks and hand them to those kids. Those kids would take that food home. There was enough food in that backpack to feed that kid plus one more in their family for the whole weekend. And then Monday morning, the kid would bring back the backpack. We'd come by and pick it up, and we'd refill it, and we'd do the whole thing the next week. And we did this with one school for the entire school year. By the end of that school year, those kids, their attendance was up 45%. Their grades were up over 30%. They were completely different kids. And the principal went, I don't know how you're doing this, but we have got to do more. Well, fast forward a few years, and now we're doing over 65 backpacks, and we're in 3 different schools now. And it all started with the simple question of, what are the needs in our community, and what's our role in meeting those needs? And I think this is core to what it means to be a sending church. It's when you as a church begin to say, you know what? We exist to be Jesus here, and we're going to send people to meet that need. Our theology tells us that God's already at work, right? So now it's about finding out where that is and joining Him in that process. And over the last few years, we've seen just this one simple act of obedience explode into arenas that, man, we had no idea would happen. The school now calls us to be volunteers at their school fair. We do a one-day beautification project with them every single year where we paint hallways and paint doors and clean up the school property. When the school has a need, they call us first now. They don't call the district. It's just built this incredible relationship where we can just be the church. It's also spilled over into other areas where we do upward sports and we do upward soccer and upward basketball, and we give away those registration to these back snack kids. We've got folks now that have started to ask that question personally, and now we've got folks in other high schools that are mentoring with, single moms that are in high school that get pregnant, and they're mentoring them on how to be a mom and how to finish high school. So this sending philosophy has now spilled over even into the international arena. We're partnering with another organization that exists to enter in trash dump communities and to help them find a self-sustainable life, a Christ-centered community in those places. And that's been really rewarding. And we're able to do that because that philosophy is already part of our DNA of now we're a sending church. We know that we exist to be Christ's presence in communities, both here locally and around the globe. A sending church isn't something special. A sending church was always part of God's design. A church that doesn't send, that is inward focused, is incomplete in her understanding of who God is and incomplete in her mission. A sending church takes the kingdom to the community. It doesn't wait for them to show up to a service because they're just not going to show up. And we're called to take it to them.